I'm Patricia Kimbrough Adams. I'm married to Woody Adams. I got married at the ripe old age of 16 years old, and Woody was 17 years old. People said that's never going to work. You just can't get married that early in life and be successful. We just celebrated our 64th wedding anniversary and are looking forward to our 65th. I think I'll keep him. I think it's going to work.
Okay, I was born in 1935 to a family of, at that time, I was the third child. And eventually we had 6 in the family, 4 girls and 2 boys. I was born in Kingsport, Tennessee. I won't say the shanty part of town, but it was not the best side of town. And my mother worked at the cotton mill. I went to school 3 years in Kingsport.
I was born in Callaway County, Kentucky. My dad was Edmund Bradley Kimbrough. My mother was Elaine Burton Kimbrough. They got married when they were 18 years old, and I was born when they were 20 years old. I have a sister who's 4 years younger than I am, and I have a brother, Eddie, who is 12 years younger. I was kind of like a little surrogate mother for him. We lived in Kentucky for a lot of years, and then I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. They were farmers. My dad's father was a sharecropper. They had well water. They had outhouses. They didn't have the conveniences that we have today. And Woody always said my grandmother probably was the kindest person that he had ever known. My grandfather cut hair on Sunday afternoons, and I can remember many of those days. On a Sunday afternoon, he'd prop up his chair out under a big oak tree, and men would come and he'd cut hair, and the women would tell stories, and we'd have lots of fun.
I was in the 4th grade when we moved to Oak Ridge, and I had started that year in the 3rd grade. So I was a year ahead of myself from then on. And everything was new in Oak Ridge. There was nothing there before the town started building and the schools started building. And Oak Ridge was a secret city at that time. And it was secret because they were making something for the war. We didn't know what. My father did not know what he was working on. And Pat's father did not know what he was working on.
Oak Ridge was such a secret city. You could not date anybody who was outside of Oak Ridge because they couldn't get in. From the time you're 12 years old, you wore a badge, and it had an identification number on it and your name. And anytime you went in and out of the gates, and the gates were manned by guards with guns, there were machine guns up on the hill. They were processing uranium in Oak Ridge, which was paramount to the dropping of the atomic bomb, which ended World War II. That was it. It was very strange, very weird now as I look back on it.
And we had the best of everything in school.
That's because the chemists who were there, you had the elite of the brain power in Oak Ridge then. Such a large percentage of those people had their PhDs in something. So the government produced everything that you wanted. You got nothing but the best. But we lived in teeny tiny little flat top houses You couldn't talk about anything that was going on
We didn't know what
in that
was going
city.
on.
Food was rationed. You had coupon books. I still have mine that has coupons in it. I still have my badge that shows my little 12-year-old picture. That's when margarine came out, was during the war, because you couldn't get butter. So they came up with this synthetic thing. You dropped a little pebble in it that was yellow. And then you start squeezing it in this plastic bag until all that yellow had worked through it and it looked like butter. So that's what you got. You couldn't get salad dressing. So that's when mayonnaise came out. You had ration books for so much milk and so much meat, and a vegetable truck would come through your neighborhood and the women would buy vegetables. It was a good life.
Was her junior year or sophomore, I don't remember which, and we were invited to a party. That's where Pat and I met. And a friend of hers had the party and invited me and my friends. I knew almost immediately that she was the girl I wanted to get to know. That was pretty much it. We went to high school together. She was behind me in the grades, and I was the big senior. We've just been together ever since.
People married much earlier back then than they do now. But we did go to that party, and we did meet, and Woody walked me home that night. It was, maybe a block, the party was, from where I lived, but it was on the same sidewalk. So he walked me back home. And the first thing I asked him is if he would get me a date with another one of the boys who was at the party. And he said no, he wouldn't. And he didn't. And
I wanted to date her myself.
And I'm glad.
I wasn't going to set her up with somebody else.
I'm glad he did, because we dated a lot. He spent a lot of time at my house. My parents loved him. He would come by and pick me up to go to school in the mornings, and we would walk to school together. He even carried my books. I know that's an unheard of thing that people don't do now, but he used to do that for me. And Mother would say, you know, he is far too skinny. He needs to put some weight on. So Mother would a lot of times have breakfast ready when he came by to pick me up, and would make sure that he ate breakfast while he was there and before he went to school. We didn't have a wedding with the bridal veil and all the stuff. We just decided we were going to get married. We had it planned that we were going to go to Murray, Kentucky, where Murray State College is, and Woody was going to check out that school to see if he might want to go to school there. So my mom and dad were going to Texas to visit her brother. So we rode with my mom and dad and my brother as far as Paris, Tennessee. And when we got to Paris, Tennessee, we got out of the car. They went on their way. We got on a bus and rode on into Murray, where my aunt and her husband picked us up. And we very quickly changed clothes, got in the car, and drove to Corinth, Mississippi to get married, because you didn't have to have blood tests done there. And we were both underage, not just one of us, but both of us were underage. I think I proposed to Woody instead of, he was there.
She did.
And it's like, okay, if we're going to take up all this time dating and being together, and my grandfather used to come visit us, and Woody and I'd be sitting on the front porch doing a little necking. And my grandfather would say, I can't go spit out the door. He chewed tobacco. I can't go spit out the door without spitting on that young man sitting out there. Everybody in the family loved Woody, and I did too. He was a tender-hearted man, and he still is a sucker for a little affection. I was married my last year in high school, and there was only one other girl who was married in high school. So we had to go and get permission from the school board for me to attend school that last year. I don't know if they thought because I was married I was going to contaminate the other girls or what. But anyway, I did get permission, and Woody had to sign my report cards. And that's a little unusual to have. I think, okay, you better make sure that's okay, that you approve of what I have done here. So it was kind of a struggle to go back to school because my priorities had changed at that time. And I would look at all these girls and these kids, and I no longer was interested in the same things that they were. At the age of 18, I became a mother, and Woody became a father. We had a girl. Debbie was our oldest child. Here we were, 18 years old, and we'd barely gone through puberty, and we're raising a baby. Worked out well. She was a good baby, very adventuresome. We found her one day sitting on top of the refrigerator. She was about 18 months old, and she had stacked up things until she could get to the top of the refrigerator, and there she was. Then 2 years later, along came David. David was a good baby, a very calm baby. He was our laid-back child. Nothing seemed to bother him. Then we decided, before we ever got married, that God had something special in mind for us. We went to church with a Japanese couple, and we kind of got close to those people. And we decided, yes, we would have children, but we also felt like God wanted us to adopt, to give somebody a home that nobody else wanted. And we thought maybe we couldn't give them a lot of things, but we could give them a home and we could love them. So we adopted an 8-month-old Japanese boy. That was Rick. We adopted him. He was born in 1961. He was 8 months old. I remember the day we went to get him. We were nervous, and we met this attorney on the steps of the courthouse. And we walked inside, and the attorney came in the room carrying this little chuck-headed boy who was 8 months old. And he handed him to us, and he said, okay, you can have him for a while, and I'll leave you alone. So he left, and he went in the other room. And in a few minutes, the attorney came back in, and he said, well, do you want him? And I thought, how can somebody ask us that? And we said, of course we want him. So we took him, got in the car, and started driving. And all he did was look at us with those big black eyes. He'd look at one and he'd look at the other. We did everything we could to make him laugh, and he wouldn't laugh. And we had brought along, it's a little dog, a little rubber dog. In fact, he still has it. And he's leaned back on his back and he's strumming a guitar. And I squeaked that dog, and when I did, he laughed. This had completed our family, or so we thought. And we had tried to have another baby, and that didn't happen. And we knew we wanted 4 kids. And after we relaxed and started raising him, one day it was, uh-oh. And there comes Randy. He is our uh-oh baby. But he has been a delight. He has a great family. Debbie had adopted 2 children. David and Barbara produced 3 amazing children. And then they gave us such wonderful gifts of great-grandchildren. Debbie has a personality all her own. When we lived in Louisville, she must have been about 5 years old. We lived in student housing, and there was a long sidewalk that went down to the main highway, and there was a railroad track that ran parallel to the main road. One day, Debbie took a $5 bill. I don't know if it was just laying around or she got it out of my purse or his wallet or what. But there was a store across the main road that sold candy. And it was the kind that's
Penny
in
candy.
an old country store where you look through the glass front and you see all these wonderful pieces of candy. And it was penny candy. She went over and purchased $5 worth of penny candy and brought it home. She had crossed this highway and had brought this candy home. We took her back over there, and
Fortunately, it was individually wrapped
yes,
candy.
and made her put all that candy back. And the man gave her her $5 back. And then we were in a store one year. She was not much older than that. And when we came out, she'd wanted a doll. It was just about this big. And she wanted a doll, and I said, no, we're not going to get the doll. Well, you don't need that doll. And we got home, and out of her coat pocket, the little kleptomaniac had pulled this doll out of her pocket. So we took her back again. And I know the lady at the store said, you didn't have to bring that back. And I said, yes, we did too. We had to bring that back. And do you know, both of those instances still stick out in her mind. She still remembers having to do that. And I remember one day, Rick got chalk. Now, we were living in Florida at this time. He must have been about, I guess, 10 maybe. And we didn't have sidewalk chalk like the kids plays with now. That stuff kind of stayed there. And Rick got out there and he wrote all over our sidewalk. And it was not the sidewalk to our house, it was the one out front. And he had drawn pictures and everything. Well, it was so much a mess. And I gave him a bucket and some water and a brush. And we still have pictures of this. He's down on his knees scrubbing the sidewalk up, and Randy gets him a Coke and a bag of potato chips, and he goes out there and sits cross-legged, and he's drinking Coke and eating potato chips and watching Rick being punished, having to clean up this sidewalk. Woody had to go pick up David one night from the police department. You want to tell them about that?
Okay, they went over in an orange grove and took some oranges that didn't belong to them. And the man that lived there called the police, and the police came and got the kids and took them to jail.
Well, this was a thing that high school kids did back then. Florida has lots of orange groves. What you do is you pick up the rotten oranges on the ground and you throw them at somebody. And of course they just splatter and they're nasty. And if you happen to pick up the little green ones, they're like getting hit with a golf ball. The reason that the cops caught them is one of the oranges hit a car on the highway. And the people called the police and said, you know, something's going on back there. Randy got involved in the cross-country team scaled the fence to the country club one night, and they went in and went swimming. And the police caught them and chased them across a tennis court and the golf course, and Woody had to go get them too. But as far as getting into trouble, that's
Not really.
that's
Not
the
real big trouble.
that's the only thing our kids ever did. We've had 4 good kids. I still remember the first house we lived in. Woody rented a room for us. And it was like a combination bedroom, living room, sitting room, everything. It had a bed and 2 chairs, I think. And then the kitchen, was
that's all.
about as big as this couch, and that's about all that was there. We lived there for a while. Then we went into student housing, which made it so much better because the people there were our age. You know, everybody's young. The only thing is, there are not that many young married couples, but they did have an area that was for married couples. And this worked out for us, and we made some lifelong friends there who are still friends at this time. And then 2 of our kids were born in South Carolina, Debbie and David. And then we moved to Kentucky, and that's when we adopted Rick. And then Randy came along right after that. And the last year, we lived in Louisville, and the last year was very cold. I mean, like 19 below zero. And we said, we can't take this anymore. So Woody said, I think let's go to Florida. His parents had moved down here now. So we took his spring break. He was teaching in Louisville at Western High School at the time, teaching German. And we came down one coast and up the other coast with him applying for German jobs. And he was hired, and it was Cocoa High at the school, but it later became Rockledge High, which I retired from. He worked there for a long time as assistant principal, but he moved on up for his retirement. We've been able to see the astronauts and the missions that they're trying to do to Mars and the mission on the moon. And we've seen when we've been there and watched as the Challenger blew up and all these things that have made history. We've been in a good area. We lived through World War II with the secret city. We've been through this. I feel like we are a piece of history because we lived it.
I guess all generations work their problems out at the time and have good times and bad times, and we had our good times and bad times, and yet I wouldn't try to advise the present generation to live a certain way or behave a certain way. They just got to experience life and do things at the time it's necessary to do things, and they'll come out good too.
I think the only thing you have to remember is keep the love. You can never love your children too much, your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren. Life is what you put into it. If you go into it half-heartedly, you'll have a half-hearted marriage. You have to learn to forgive, and that's a hard thing for people to do, is when you feel like somebody has slighted you. But you go into a marriage loving with all your heart. You take the good with the bad. You have to learn to hold your tongue, and that's been a real hard one for me because I kind of speak my mind, but just love with all your heart.
And
don't hurt people. Do the best you can do. If you're a garbage man, you be the best garbage man you can be. I spent 25 years counseling 9th graders. Those are really tough years. And as you get ready to raise your children and go through those years, have a little more patience with them. Speaking to your children's grandchildren, I would say we're a mixed combination of a lot of things. We're Caucasian, we have Mexicans, we have East Indians, we're German,
Chinese.
We have Chinese, we have Filipino, we have Japanese, we have black hair, blonde hair, red hair, brown hair, white hair, no hair. Have we
Watch
been
it now.
successful? Yeah. Will we ever be famous? Nah, we'll never be famous. But would we do it again? Yeah, we'd do it again.